Welcome to the second video of the Manchester School Readiness Council's 95210 Preschool Fitness Plan. So this segment will actually go over what the plan is all about and give you some tips and considerations when increasing or working on physical activity with young children. So the program manual that I put together provides activities that can be integrated into a daily preschool or child care center schedule. However, it can be included in your home schedule if you're a parent watching this video. Multiple activity sessions of 10 to 15 minutes are strongly recommended. Now, even though you're trying to obtain at least 60 minutes of structured activity, oftentimes this works a little bit better when you break it down into smaller segments. In the school setting, smaller sessions work much better. This prevents children from getting bored and too winded from an activity and keeps within their shorter attention span. Program leaders can have more flexibility with shorter sessions this way, and they can use activity bursts to connect with a lesson or a theme as they're teaching within their curriculum. So, some special considerations to consider when you're working with young children. So initially you want to include some more gross movement patterns. So broader movements such as running, jogging, shuffling, things that don't require a lot of fine motor skills. And select fitness activity in the activities that you choose, and then start to challenge some fine motor skills later on as they really begin to get more confidence with those gross movement patterns. You want to keep in mind that a movement must be repeated many times before it becomes smoother and refined. Children will master different movements and locomotor patterns at different rates. So even though the children in your group may be the same age, don't hold them to the same expectation. In fact, certain skills, such as skipping or jump roping, may be easily accomplished by some 4 or 5-year-olds, but then you'll find some elementary school children who are still struggling with those movements. Some take a little bit more time to master, and definitely the repetition is important. You also want to consider that children have a higher threshold for sweating, so therefore they can become overheated more quickly than adults can. And oftentimes they're not going to recognize the signals or speak up and be able to point that out to you. So you want to really pay attention to how their expression, how they're moving. Make sure that you're encouraging hydration, not just during the exercise or activity session, but throughout the day. And just small sips throughout the session as well so they don't become uncomfortable. You definitely want to take some extra precaution if the air temperature is higher than body temperature. That might be the time you want to focus more on some balance activities or stretching activities. There we go. So you want to also consider the timing of your activity sessions. You definitely would want to avoid scheduling anything right before or after a meal. I can tell you from my experience working with some home daycare centers, when I scheduled sessions right before lunchtime, that could be a really tricky time. That's, as kids get hungry, and adults too, of course, they're not feeling very energized, and they may be a little cranky, and they're not going to be getting the most out of that session or activity burst. You also don't want to ask them to move quickly, move around a lot right after a meal. They're going to feel a little sluggish, and you don't want to cause any GI distress. Also consider that young children don't have the same stamina or attention span often as older children and adults. So you want to keep things short, keep it simple, and keep it varied. Okay, so some instructional tips as you take children through these various activities that I'm going to recommend. First of all, you want to keep it inclusive. You want to select activities that allow children of varying physical abilities, interests, and needs to stay moving, ideally for the entire duration of your plan. You want to select time rather than a number of repetitions for most activities. However, if kids are winded, go ahead and let them take a brief break. Maybe give them some options to actively rest before rejoining the group. Doing your best, you want to keep them moving during these activity bursts or during your movement sessions. So select activities that can keep the kids in motion as much as possible. And probably with the preschool age, you want to avoid most elimination games. If there's an activity that requires the children to wait in line or take turns, you can ask them to perform a movement such as a bunny jump or hop on one foot while they're waiting to take their turn. Explain and demonstrate, and sometimes repeat. Young children and many people in general are more visual learners, so go over a description of what you're going to do, but then give a demonstration of what the movement is. You want to keep your directions brief, and anyone who works with children already knows that. But the longer it takes you to describe or set up an activity, the quicker you're going to lose them. So you want to basically, it's probably going to be too complicated if it takes you a long time to describe it. Keep it small. Ideally, now this can be hard in a larger daycare center or preschools, in a preschool setting, but if you can work with smaller groups of children under the 10 children or less, that's ideal. You can certainly make it happen with larger groups, but smaller groups tend to be a little bit more efficient and get a little bit more out of the activity. And then you can really individualize it a little bit better for each student or child. Make sure if you are using equipment that you set up enough and maybe even a little extra. You want to have enough for each child, and as silly as it sounds, if I have only one yellow beanbag, I just won't use that beanbag because they will all want that one. So try to set yourself up so you can avoid arguments and give them all options. You can tie themes in. So a lot of the activities that I'm going to go over in the next video can easily be adapted to a teaching or a seasonal theme or a holiday theme. You can rename the movements and games to connect activities to your lessons, and feel free to use your creativity. So the next video is going to actually go over all these sample activities.